Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, works.
You're driving? Are you driving?
I'm not driving. I'm just parking somewhere.
Yeah, that seems to be the problem in Kathmandu, especially. Are you in Kathmandu?
Yes, I'm
Yeah, that
from.
seems to be the problem. You can't find parking, and then you can't find those places where you can like relax and do these things. Especially when it comes to finding those special areas where you can just be on your own and then work. You have to either go to a cafe where it's like too dense and too loud, or where
Yeah.
you have to go to a library where like they're telling you to shush, and then you can't talk to someone. Have you guys had that sort of a experience?
I have that a lot because I tend to join meetings from outside, and then cafes are too loud,
Mhm.
and I generally end up doing these calls in my car,
Oh,
parked some outside the cafe.
what about you?
We don't have a dedicated meeting space, meeting room, so it's not a problem for us.
Oh,
We rarely do meetings in cafes, so
mhm.
it works for us.
Yeah. With with this whole interview, I thought, what would be the best way to highlight a humanitarian aid app that helps you remotely control things is meet remotely and see the productive ability of humans who can meet and chat remotely. To give a perspective to everyone, I'm in a different part of Kathmandu. I'm in the Bhaktapur side, and it takes me like 2 hours just to get to different places because of the dense population, and they're in different areas. So we're just trying to see how effective it is doing Skype and doing in a conference. Let's go into what you guys do. You guys are both humanitarians. You guys have a specific skill set that you've applied yourself into helping create this humanitarian app that's called Fieldsight. Can you tell us a little bit about how it started? And I know personally how it started, but can you enlighten our viewers about that?
Okay, Nikita, you first.
You
Mhm,
should start.
Okay. Uh, so I am an engineer, a geomatics engineer, to be specific. I was trained around GIS mapping, digital mapping, and like a lot of web services for mapping
mhm,
specifically. So I completed my bachelor's in engineering in 2014, and then I started a company with my two of my classmates.
mhm,
So I have been an entrepreneur sort of. Um, so since the very beginning, I was involved in creating this company, like creating projects. So when I met Justin, who is our manager, the innovation lead
mhm,
at UNOPS,
mhm,
um, I had been running this company for around 2 years.
mhm,
So I had this team of programmers, mapping experts, and other supporting staff already. Um,
mhm,
so Justin and I, when we like first met for this to discuss around this concept of creating this tool for remote monitoring of construction projects in the context of post earthquake in Nepal.
mhm,
So there were so many houses devastated and broken. People lost their lives, and there was a crisis of like 5 or 7 million houses destroyed, and like who would rebuild those? Um, so that kind of crisis was calling for something, some solution. And Justin was coordinating with the UN and other donors in finding out funding for development of this kind of tool. So we teamed up. That was in 2016, late 2016, I think. We teamed up to start developing a prototype. So that was when I engaged the workforce that I had.
mhm,
So my company is called Naxa,
mhm,
and we deployed this team of around like 7 people at that time to
mhm,
start working on this system. So
mhm,
since then, it's been about 4 years. I have been working as the technical lead for this system. And I have been leading the team at my company. So the modality is that my company is providing consulting service for UNOPS right
mhm,
now. I have also been working. I had been working actually for about a year at UNOPS directly as a technical lead for this project, but then I switched back to my company again so that I would have more time to spend with the team itself.
Mhm.
That's my background. I am a technical person. I don't do active coding, but I lead the team that does that. So yeah, that's my background. Nikita?
Okay, I just turned it to mute. So, I'm a professional social worker, and then I joined the team in December 2016.
Mhm.
There was a vacancy in UNOPS, and then I applied for it. I got the job, and I joined the team in 2016. It was on the very beta phase when I joined the team of Fieldsight. Arun's team and Justin, they had already met together, come together, and developing the first prototype that we were about to test. So I
Mhm.
have been involved with Fieldsight from the very beginning of this project. And the reason why we developed this software, as Arun mentioned, was after the 2015 earthquake, which we all were affected by it. And one of the major reason at UNOPS, what we discovered was that poor compliance with building standards and construction standards was the major reason why most of these buildings had collapsed. So after that, the rebuilding phase started, reconstruction phase started with the government, and they didn't have a very good system which can track all of the reconstruction they were planning to do after the earthquake.
Mhm.
So we thought building these houses again with the same mistakes would not do any good in the future. So there has to be a system that will track everything, at least the quality of the buildings, so that whatever is being reconstructed or the entire Nepal being rebuilt in the future needs to be stronger and more resilient. So that
Mhm.
was the goal.
Mhm.
With that goal, with the goal of building back better, we actually developed FuelSite, which, as Arun mentioned, is a remote app. We have a web app as well as a mobile app,
Mhm.
which lets the field users that are working remotely to collect data, information, and then send it to the project managers who are at the central offices, so that even though the sites are very remote and they cannot have very close supervision of them, they can still see what's going on in the field and then track if there are any errors near real time. So that was our goal. My specialty in this team is basically making sure that whoever are using FieldSite, the users, the clients, the partners, they are on board. They know how to use the application on their best of ability, and then basically create all of the training materials, manuals, so that it's easy for people if they want to use this independently. So that's my role in FieldSite.
That's awesome. Now, what seems to me is that I wasn't here during the earthquake, and because of that, I don't have the insight of the hardships you guys had to face. Because right after the earthquake, there was like the economic blockade, and you guys had to deal with
Okay.
that. And people have told me stories of stuff that had happened during that time as well. Can you tell me how it was like just like post earthquake and you're just moving into this whole thing? What's the scenario? You said like millions of homes were destroyed right there, and then you were talking about how different individuals are reacting differently, and then it's such a big such I'm not going to use the word that starts with this C and ends with a K, but it was a uh, such a big issue like that. How was it for you? Because I've been asking this to everyone like who was here. How was it for you guys during that time?
So for me, I was in Kopan, which is inside Kathmandu, the most, I think, one of the most damaged areas.
Hmm.
So I saw a house collapse right in front of my brother's house where I was at.
Wow.
So I could see the, like, right at the moment I could see the effect. So this three-storied house had collapsed, and like about 10 people were inside it. so got killed. And when I went into the roads, I could see the effect. Like several houses had been collapsed, and the roads were blocked. You could see temples with the roofs fallen down. You could see trees falling down. So that was the immediate, effect, the immediate realization that I had was like, Kathmandu is gone, like it's totally destroyed. But then when I reached Chabel, and I could see that it's not that as bad as we expected, seeing the few houses that were collapsed in Kapan. But then when you heard about Dharara collapsed, you heard about the heritages, all of them were totally destroyed. That was like, that could give you a sense of how big it was, how bad it was. And then the most shocking thing was, like, in the rural parts of Nepal, in the villages, in the hills, these earthquake affected districts, all 80% of the houses were damaged. Like, they were not livable anymore. Like, most of them were totally collapsed. A few were like partially collapsed. You could do some retrofitting and still start living in it. Uh, but like, if you look at the damage, all the heritage damage and the big buildings inside Kathmandu that were like mended, and then people started commercializing again. That was only a part of the disaster, the effect of the disaster. The big effect was on the hills, on these mud and stone houses that totally collapsed and were not livable anymore. And the problem escalated when these people who had no house to live in had to, like, find out temporary shelters. So these landslide prone areas, and in the rainy seasons, they had to live outside in these temporary shelters. So and that was the moment when I think Justin had this realization, when everybody's attention was in Nepal, when, like, we realized that these houses, when they have to be reconstructed, who is going to do that? How do we do that? Because, like, if you want to assure quality reconstruction, if you want all the guidelines to be met right while the construction is happening, you have to have a technical person, an engineer on the ground, on the site. And that's not possible when you're talking about tens of thousands of houses. You don't have that many engineers in Nepal. You can't afford to deploy that many engineers in Nepal in each house, not even in a village. So that was the problem. That was like a clear problem that you had to find other ways around. So, like, I think Justin had the realization. Then we were also thinking of, like, how our focus was more on how to make the relief distribution more proportional, how to make a wider coverage and need-based coverage of relief distribution. But then after the immediate response to the earthquake, the next challenge was rebuilding these houses. And then the NRA, the Government Reconstruction Authority, and all these donors and INGOs, everyone was thinking of, how do you do that? How do you rebuild these houses? And that's when, like, we thought of, let's develop something that would allow you, um, even if you don't have a site engineer on the ground, what if somebody could travel around a couple of villages, do these monitoring checks, the quality checks, every 2 or 3 days per house, or when a milestone for that house is complete? What if all these technical details, all these photographs, all these minute details of during the construction can be captured? Somebody and a set of engineers at NRA or the project team can have a look at those specific data. Would that not allow right on time detection of errors on the ground? And what if, like, correction suggestions like messages or guidelines could be sent to the engineers so that they could guide guide the laborers on the ground.
Mhm,
So we tried to think of how a system that could be modular enough to to capture your whole project
mhm,
and also be convenient to use totally offline on the ground by the engineers,
mhm,
and also have this two-way communication of like, you send the data, we look at the data, we provide you feedback right on time before you go ahead with magnifying your errors. So that
mhm.
was the basic concept of like why we needed to build this and how we developed it.
Mhm. Like I understand that with that completely because having had the background of being a mechanical engineer and having worked in these sites, I don't work as a civil engineer per se, but I do know how to take a measurement with different tools. So I understand if the center of gravity of any building shifts from the place it's intended, the earthquake is going to have an impact that the scientist or the engineer or geomatics engineer cannot fathom. And I also want to address something about the Nepal's how we do in engineering. We don't do regular checks and service, even if we did not have this kind of apps. Like people would not go, they will make a building, they'll do measurements first, and then they will construct something, and they will not do recheck measurements and see if the center of gravity has shifted or not. Because most people who are professionals, who are like really educated people who want to make sure their work is excellent, they do that. But I see all these other engineers, they just sign off on these, and then years later when you're checking on the
Yep.
property like map and everything has shifted, and it's not
Yep.
like the tolerancing is like in like
Mhm.
feet instead of like centimeters. So that's very crazy. Is that
Yeah.
the other consequence of your app? Like you're trying to improve like the housing construction industry here, or like in developing nations where they have these tools and they enable themselves, and it puts less financial strain on the developer themselves so that they can bring out quality products?
So here in UNOPS, yes, this is our core goal because UNOPS does a lot of construction basically throughout
Mhm,
the globe, not just in Nepal. Wherever there's a disaster, we recruit our team, we start rebuilding the nation right away. So that's what UNOPS is particularly working at. For Fieldsight, yes, that is our goal to ensure better structures, to ensure safer structures, so that even though natural disasters will happen,
mhm,
right? The climate is changing, the world is changing. This is not going to end.
mhm,
So we need to make sure that we build buildings safer, as you mentioned, that the designs are compliant, that while building these structures, every stage is checked to ensure that it does not deviate from what was agreed. So yeah, this is definitely our goal. Besides these, in Nepal, when we started, as we know, a lot of the government here, organizations, they were working with paper surveys, right? They were working on paper, collecting data on paper, using WhatsApp, using Viber, whatnot to
mhm,
communicate in their field, and this does not provide a proper system to store your data for future. Having a proper asset management tool, having every record of your infrastructure, why they collapse, how they can be better. So they didn't have that historical data. So FieldSite basically helps you to have every data centralized, but then decentralize that data as well per site, per building, per beneficiary. So this is one of the very key important features that we have. Our very first pilot actually prototype began with the National Reconstruction Authority here. There was a very beta version of our app, but then we helped them to track 512 sites where engineers, geologists, they went out and did survey of the settlements in order to figure out at-risk people or at-risk communities that need to be rehabilitated. So that was our very first prototype. And while working with them, we just realized that everything was on paper. They didn't have anything digitized, and they didn't have information about these settlements at all. They didn't know the level of damage, how they can have everything in a proper dashboard, which can be shared with their donors, partners, which can be shared with the public. So this was our very motive, so that this data can be stored forever. They can be accessed forever. Everything is digital. We are trying to use the mobile revolution. We're trying to go paperless. So yes, building back better is our core, but then there are other things that basically help rebuild a nation through Fieldsight.
Now, it might sound like a technical question, and I'm gonna refer to you on that. Arun.
Yeah.
So, what are you using? Are you using AWS platform? What
Yeah.
sort of programming language are you using? And then she mentioned that you're taking it centralized
Yep.
and then making it decentralized. Have you thought of taking this into blockchain territory? Because why I mentioned that is yesterday. It's very funny. Day before yesterday, I watched this news report from Kantipur News, and they showed this old office where they had all these maps for all houses, like Noxa, all
Yeah.
these Noxas, and they were all like decayed. And that's a
Mhm.
problem you guys are solving. So, have you guys tried of incorporating that sort of a technology in here too?
Um, so okay, we are hosting our tool in AWS right now, but we plan to switch to Google
Hmm.
um, uh, anytime soon. The core technology, the backend language is Python,
Hmm.
Django framework, and we have an app that's built for Android for now. We have plans, like we have immediate plans to also extend to iOS.
Hmm.
We are also using a few underlying libraries like data collection tools like Kobo Toolbox, if you've heard of it, and ODK in the mobile app. So these are the two things that we borrowed from the global humanitarian sector, and then we added all these custom features. So what Nikita was telling about aggregation and disaggregation of data is. Um, so let's say you have a project where you need to construct 50,000 houses.
Hmm.
That's huge, right? That's a huge task that involves hundreds of people on the ground, couple of maybe hundreds of people on the office as well. And then you have all these needs on reporting, all these needs on like who looks at the data, all these kinds of needs. That's a huge task. But then what we allow is like we definitely support 50,000 houses in a project at the same time. Monitoring these constructions is totally possible using Fieldsight. But then
Hmm.
what we also do is we 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 store the data such that let's say after 5 years, if we have to look at how that house was built, you could do that per house. So 5 years down the line, if you want to, let's say, if an insurance company wants to look at the
Hmm.
compliance of the house, the company can simply look at the profile of the house and go into the details like what was the size of the rod used. Yes, yeah. So I was telling you about how you could go back to the tiniest of details
Hmm.
during a construction process. An
Hmm.
insurance company or a potential buyer of the house could go back and look at how the house was built, what
Hmm.
was the size of the rod, what was the ratio of the concrete, what was the kind of materials used, who were like, how many people were involved,
Hmm.
and when did this happen, when was the mistake, and when it was corrected. So
Hmm.
things like that. Everything is around an individual site. So site is something that we is like a generic word for any kind of infrastructure, maybe a house or a bridge or a road. We call it a site. So
Hmm.
everything is around a site, but then and all the data is disaggregated by sites.
Mm,
But then you also have this project level aggregation of data. So like for 50,000 houses, you could get insights on like overall progress. You could get insights on how compliant all these houses are, how what are the milestones right now, that these houses have reached. But then
mhm,
you can also go back and look at the fine details of each house. So that's how we have structured our system.
mhm,
The availability of data to public is not yet there, so you can't really like give out data on my house to someone else, right? But then
I see.
there are some aspects of data that we could potentially share for the bigger good, like if we want to access the resilience of the whole country, based on the sample of sites that have been monitored using Fieldsight, we could use the data points that we have in the system to say like the houses that were built after the earthquake and that were monitored using Fieldsight, so that these houses are 80% compliant to the guidelines, and this means like these houses will stand for next 50 years, things
Mhm.
like that. You could get insights out of it. Right
So
now we're not
that
doing that.
also creates
Yeah,
some sort of like a transparency thing because if you don't have any data, you can't really trust any engineer to build it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like an
yeah.
engineer is
So
as good as his measurements or her measurements.
yes,
So that
yes.
whole aspect of transparency helps. Is that why like OPS like push this like data gathering thing? Because transparency is a big issue in Nepal.
Mm-hmm,
And like that whole like when I was not here, and then we used to hear this news like for 12 days everybody was throwing in money, everybody was giving out resources. Like a couple of folks from our university, what we did was in my department, my senior, we all collected money together, and then we collected about $10,000, and then they all traveled to Nepal on their own dime, but they didn't spend a rupee of that money. And then they went to this village and they helped construct like these small tunnels with the army people, and they were featured in our local news over there in New Orleans too. But when we heard that the government was stopping everybody to come into
mm-hmm,
Nepal and helping
yeah,
like people over there, it was very
yeah,
scary. It was very like, oh, it's like what are they gonna do with all that money? And I go to Basantapur like every once in a while. I go to Patan, and all those structures are still like they have like that scaffolding over there, and
mm-hmm,
they're on pylons, and
yeah.
I don't see any progress. And then the compliance issue is very bad too. Can you tell me a little bit about that, Nikita? Because you're in the social working sector, and all of that is like our culture and all of that like drives social innovation here. Can you explain a little bit about that situation?
Okay, so yes, you weren't here, we were here, so we know there was chaos. Oh my god, after the earthquake, it was chaotic. Me and my family, we were literally living off of our car. I'm not even joking. So yeah, while the whole rebuilding effort started, I was working with UNOPS as well, for doing rapid assessments, and we were basically taking urgent needs from communities. And when we're doing rapid assessment, it's very difficult. You get all sorts of demands, you get all sorts of information. You don't know if the information are even correct. You need to figure it out, right? So post disaster context is always very difficult and chaotic. That is understandable. And a lot of these post disaster efforts tend to be redundant and repetitive, right? In the same village in Sintapacho, every other organization is giving out materials, is rebuilding schools, are handing out materials to beneficiaries. So a lot of redundant efforts did happen around the post-disaster needs assessment period. Um, and of course, there is corruption, there is accountability issue. We cannot deny that. Almost 70% of the efforts might be utilized in a proper manner, but the rest is questionable. We don't know where the money goes, how it is being utilized. So yeah, there is corruption, there is accountability issue, there is lack of resources, there is a lot of issues around, um, um, you know, these monitoring and program implementation phases. But one of the key challenges, what we realized after working with a lot of partners around UNOPS, a lot of projects, is the only reason for the corruption and accountability, the not the only maybe, but the core reason is lack of visibility of data from the field, right? That is the core issue. There are other issues, but then I think one of the key issues was we didn't have good data from the field, timely data from the field, and then structured data from these affected or priority districts. So that was the key challenge with most of the projects that were working here. So I think FieldSight basically eliminates that challenge by making sure you get timely data, you get structured data, and you get data, as Arun mentioned, in an aggregated and disaggregated version. So I think having data and having a system that basically is supervising your activity, supervising your work in the field, kind of gives you, I wouldn't say it's not like big boss or CCTV camera, but then you have in your mind that your responsibility and your duties towards this particular task is being monitored. So it basically gives the users, it basically gives the people who are working for reconstruction efforts, it basically almost binds them to work in a structure and making sure that every other effort is of good quality, every other effort is work for the beneficiaries, basically. So yeah, FieldSight basically helps to eliminate corruption and accountability to a certain level. We wouldn't say it will completely, solve the issue, but yeah, we are getting there.
So to be more specific on how FieldSight does that, let's say you deploy someone to the field. He is assigned to like 500 houses. But then generally with the government engineers or like field-based users, you might have the chances of that person not going to the place he should be going, and then not capturing the data right on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So you could like you can imagine someone sitting on his hotel in the headquarter, but then reporting for the houses on the villages. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have checks on that. Like you could get reports from them, like handwritten reports, like forms that are like filled out in the hotels. You don't really have like mechanisms to stop that, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have to rely on the accountability, like the ethical side of that person.
Mm-hmm.
What FieldSight does is, like, if you are assigned to these houses, you have to be physically present over there. Otherwise, the data that you send is going to show that you have not been there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
your location while you are capturing the data is tracked.
Mm-hmm.
So
That also
and the
offline,
system,
works offline.
Oh, okay.
yeah, and you know the location of the house that he's supposed to be at. So the system can show you issues if the person is like 2 kilometers far from the site, or even 500 meters far from the site. So you have to be there, and the date time, everything that you do on your app, like whenever you start filling a form, whenever you edit it, the time is captured. So you can't really get ahead of it without, like, you can't really deceive the system.
Mm-hmm.
So a field engineer um, uh, has to be accountable. Otherwise, he won't be like you won't be in the system anymore. Like, you won't be in the project anymore, because there are so many accountability issues if the data is reported time and again falsely.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
and the other
I don't want to paint everybody with
yeah
this wide brush and say everybody does not, nobody goes to these events.
Yeah.
There are some people,
Some
if,
people.
if you're
Yeah.
if you're coming into Nepal,
Hmm.
come with that mind. This goes out to all the viewers. So there are some people that would take advantage of that situation.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
even so, like even if they're like they have some location problem, something like that, they'll give it to
Mhm.
someone and then they'll sit down and they'll try to do all of this. But what their app is doing is they're trying to solve that problem at each step. It's not like, and I've talked to other app developers in this podcast scene, and then I've worked with them as well, and they tell me you have to take each problem at once and then solve that problem and do different multiple iterations and then see how users react to it. So I was like,
Mhm.
what's the type of feedback that you've been getting from your users? Is it like what are like the funny, like you didn't even expect those problems to like come out, and then they're bringing you these problems, and then you're going back to the drawing board and asking yourself like, how do I solve this problem for this individual, and how do I react to demands like these in the future?
Yeah. So since most of our users have to work in pretty rural areas without internet access and depend upon their mobile device to use the system, if their device does not work properly, you can't expect them to send reports digitally, and then like you have to go back manual. Uh, so that is, I think, one of the biggest problem, which I think is also changing. You won't expect the same problem to be around in next 5 years. So since every part of the country is has electricity, has internet access, everyone is using smartphones, you expect the problem to not be there down the line. But right now people people have this problem of like their devices, when overloaded with a lot of data that they collect offline, they run out of processing power. The RAM is occupied. You don't have spaces. You have to capture images, and then that stays there in the app. So things like that. I mean, like technically, there are some things like bottlenecks that are obvious, but also like they are problems for the users who have to be on the field and also report digitally. The other problem, which is also a little funny, but then like it is a problem, is that users expect the system to sync data, um, but then also sync data while they are offline, which is like users don't actually understand. I mean, like some users don't actually understand that you have to be in the internet in order to like sync data to the internet. So that's kind of obvious problems that people report, and then we can't really do anything. But then we have worked a lot on making sure that all the data that they capture offline gets readily synced to the server whenever they're back online. Nothing is lost on the field. I mean, like device the device can be destroyed, and we have mechanisms of like, if we get hold of the all of the SD card or something, we can get the data back. But then if there is physical damage on the device without any possibility of recovering the data back, we can't do anything on that. And there are generally things like these that people face difficulties with, and these are also rare cases with some users. But then mostly, since the times are changing, I think people are really feeling that having an app on your phone can help you actually report data. You don't have to be carrying all these forms. You don't have to like be writing more, spending a lot of time writing things down when you're back in the hotel. You don't have to do that. While you're on the field, you take pictures, you fill out the form digitally, and that serves its purpose. So people are feeling comfortable. They get like a ease in their workflows. But then there are also these bottlenecks that might be hard to overcome. But then we expect with time and like certain changes with our mechanisms, we can overcome those as well.
And I believe like you have let me just say this. you have decreased the like output of this
Yeah.
earth by like employing this, because less
Yeah.
paper means
Yes.
less
Yes.
carbon content. What were you saying?
Yep.
Yeah, we're on a
That's
global climate strike in Fieldsight.
Yeah, yeah. That's your like one brick to this whole like climate initiative that you guys
Yeah,
have.
that's
Uh,
our contribution. We're going
yes.
paperless.
yeah.
But
What
yeah,
were you saying?
definitely, when we start working with users, initially they get scared. Oh, technology,
Mhm,
right? Scary. And then they do get a bit hesitant.
mhm,
But we need to thank our users. They are the ones who, you know, let us know about what goes on in the field. Their feedback, their comments are actually what make FieldSite what it is today.
mhm,
You need to see it. If you saw the app that we had before, I think we've come a long, long way, and it's all because of our partners and users.
mhm.
They have given us very, very valuable feedback, and yes, as you said, we have had a lot of different iterations to our app, and now we're in a position where we can say that we're a very good app, which in the area of infrastructure and construction, for monitoring, is one of the best apps that are available in the market.
That's interesting because yesterday I'll tell you this amazing experience I had of Nepali bureaucracy and the uses of paper. I had to go get my degree validated from the university here. So I go over there and they tell me I have to go to this, do this form. I do this, and then they ask me to photocopy everything. I photocopy everything, and then apparently that university's that particular major was not there. So I go and I print out my thesis. It's about 70 pages long, and I print out this syllabus. That's another 70 pages. I have to bind it. I have to put it in a like a file or a my clear bag or whatever. And I have to give that person. I have to wait a month to get that done.
Hmm.
And that's in like education field where you could find out just by like emailing my university and asking for my name, and
Yep.
then just like ticking that whole
Hmm.
part. Or you could like even if you wanted to validate it, go a step further, go to the accreditation board and ask them, and then just validate that. And all of these kind of things like compile to like the things that we do not want to do. We do not want to involve ourselves with so much hassle. We do not want to involve ourselves with so much pressure. I don't want to go to that university center. I don't want to do that. Like you guys have the same feeling, right? Like who wants to go to a site if you've already built everything and you just have to take measurements and then you have to take updates? If the local individual is there and the local individual is vigilant and you have all these checks and balances built into your app, I think it's like common sense to use the app. Don't you guys think?
I would like to differ a little bit. We are not trying to completely remove the role of employees or staff.
Mhm,
We're not trying to like substitute their role.
mhm.
We're just trying to make their work efficient.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like completely, stopping or ceasing to go into your site and checking what's going on in the field, but then utilizing time, right? Utilizing fuel, rather than traveling 3 days to your car and going to the site every week. Maybe you can just go there in a month, once
Mhm,
a month, twice,
mhm.
once 2 months. I don't know. So it's trying to make work efficient and not trying to completely substitute the processes, the things that we already have.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's the Gen Z in me that doesn't want to talk to people and just wants to do all their work in their from their computer, and then having not the hassle to deal with people is something I cherish a lot. I'd rather sit in a room or go outside and not deal with these people. And then there's so much like dense population, especially in Kathmandu. In terms of area, it's not a big city, but then we have about 6 million people here, and then it goes crazy like every day goes crazy, like a
yeah.
construction is going on the middle of the road, and all these standards are not being met and all of that. So do you guys have these like you said there were milestones in your app about construction? So do these milestones in some way give out like do you have like a ratings based on those milestones, because you've had so much data already gathered, And if you do you have some sort of a rating on, okay, if this building is 80% compliant or 90% compliant, do you give a certain rating? And then how do these insurance companies, like you said, if they want a role, how do they use that data and then leverage that? Can you give us a scenario on how a insurance company or like a government agency could use that and then uh, make rational real world decisions off of it?
So, so insurance companies are not in the scene yet in field site. So we're not selling data to companies
Yeah.
yet, but and we don't plan to.
Mhm,
But as a practical example, like in the context of Nepal, so after this earthquake, like these houses had to be rebuilt, and then the government provides the financial aid in three tranches. So
mhm,
there's first tranche where they give out 50,000 to the homeowner. In the second tranche, they give out 2 lakhs, and then in the third tranche, they give the rest of the 50,000, I guess. So all these tranches are given out based on your compliance. So
mhm,
each house is eligible to get the next 2.5 lakh only if their DPCs are well built, their foundation is strong enough. So there is this criteria, and all these technical details are considered before the financial aid is transferred to that homeowner's account.
mhm,
So what Fieldsight is doing is like Fieldsight is capturing all the data right on the ground on the
mhm,
time at the same time, and then it is archiving everything to provide as a reference later on. The government engineers, what they do is they do inspections on the field as well, and then they can also look at the data while the foundation was being built.
mhm,
So they have like data-based decision making capability out of the system. So they can look at the data, they can see the compliance of the house, and decide whether or not this homeowner can receive the next installment.
mhm,
So that's one example. We have FieldSite is not just for construction projects. We are like we came out of this scenario, the whole construction industry. We are targeting to help in the rural most parts of the world in projects that are targeting beneficiaries that are in the remotest parts. That's our core, but then we also are able to support other kinds of projects. So let's say you have a project where you need to collect data, not of construction, but then you want to collect some kind of data in the field. Let's say you want to carry out a research where you will be interviewing your sample groups in a structured format. You could do that using FieldSite because we provide custom form creation facility in the system. So you can define how you are ordering your questions, what are the logic, what are how they should skip the questions based on the responses received beforehand, things like that. So we support multiple kinds of projects, and we are also supporting lots of different kinds of projects in different countries. So in Nepal, we are targeting lots of these reconstruction initiatives. In other countries, we are mostly it's constructions, but then we are also supporting, like we have supported a WASP project. So that is generally focused on sanitation, hygiene, and water supply. We have a project that is being used that is being run in Paraguay, that deals with like agricultural products. So
mhm,
whenever there is production in the field by a farmer, someone does capture the data in the app, so that you have a record of how much is being produced, what the supply is, and what the demand is on the market. So they are trying to do like demand supply analysis based on data that's captured in FieldSite. So FieldSite is like basically set up to work generically for your needs. So when you ask me about how you rate your sites or how you rate the construction quality, do you have points or ratings that you provide with the system? We don't do that. We leave you to decide that. We leave you to like structure your forms, your monitoring protocols, your needs, and you are totally the system is flexible enough to allow you to do that. So
Mhm.
if you want to set your milestones based on this, and you want to calculate your progress based on these parameters, you could do that, and we leave it to you to decide how you are going to set things up. But then we provide lots of trainings, assistance to the users whenever we encourage them to set it up themselves. We
Mhm.
are there with them. So total support during the implementation, and we encourage users to do it themselves.
Mhm. That's that's such an interesting prospect of having this app that's really versatile for different areas. You talked about agriculture, and then yesterday I was thinking like if there was like a flood and then they had all these supplies they needed to distribute to all these areas, and then they had a head count of all these affected people, you could monitor how they were getting like good nutrition, and if they had like you said already with shelter and everything that could be implemented during a landslide, a flood, or you could have like a wildfire, especially like
Mhm.
these wildfires in California. They're like really dangerous. I know they have all their government level work happening over there, but like there's so many social work organizations even over there, and they're trying to help these firefighters tackle all these issues, and all these distribution issues are really happening over there. And whenever there's more data, it's more useful for you guys, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
we've
we've
already been
deployed it
using
in
Fieldsight.
landslides. Yep. Go ahead,
So
Nikita.
yes, so I'd like to give an example in this context of where whenever there's a disaster and then there's a distribution process, right? What happens is everybody starts running everywhere, and then you don't track anything properly. You don't
Mhm.
have a proper system to make
Mhm.
sure that you have the beneficiary data, the items that you have sent out,
Mhm.
whether the items were of good use for them or not.
Mhm.
So one example is with UNFPA. They
Uh-huh.
have been using Fieldsight here
Mhm.
for distributing their dignity kits after any disaster. So even recently, they've used the application for distributing dignity kits after the for the flood response. So they already have a survey which helps them track their distribution, and then later, after distributing, they can go back and then collect data from these beneficiaries as a feedback if those distribution kits were of use or not. So yeah, this is a very good example of having a structured data collection mechanism already established, so that whenever a disaster hits you, you already have the tools in place. And since FieldSight is a tool that is very easily scalable for large projects, you just need to make sure you have everything in place. And whenever there's a disaster, you can just deploy the tool right away and then start collecting data, and then revisit the data again later for your use.
Yeah, and then that gives you the perspective that 4 years ago or 5 years ago in Nepal, the earthquake situation destroyed X amount of houses, and then we rebuilt those X houses. But then you could also have a references for all the houses you did not build, because like people could do surveys on those and say, okay, compared to all these rebuilt houses, you can compare these unbuilt houses that were standing during the earthquake, which condition they are, and then you could do a comparative study. And not only is this useful for engineers, this is useful for surveyors as well. And as a geomatics engineer, what's your now we have this in engineering, we have this like friendly rivalry with everyone. As a mechanical engineer, so a group of people, we had this like friendly thing going on with electricals and civils. With geomatics engineers, how do you how do you see this, some sort of a bias you have like with your own field? I understand with Nikita too, like in our field there's specific rivalries going on. How do you stand behind it, like out of it, let's say, and then stand in the shoes of a civil engineer or mechanical engineer? How do you do that product development? Because most of our viewers are entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
they need to get into the foots of the customer, the client, whoever you call
Mhm.
it, the user. How do you how do you suggest those people? Now we're getting into like the advice part
Yeah.
of this recording.
Um,
How do you get into that part where you thinking in terms of the user's mindset?
Yeah, this applies for all typical software development projects. You have to be with the user, piloting, like testing things out, taking feedback. You have to do that continuously. And no matter how mature you are in terms of like features, the whole system, there are spaces where you have to listen to the user, make revisions, go back to the drawing board, and then like come back later with a better version. So we have always been doing that. We have had users that are really diverse, not just like geographically, but also in terms of like the technical know-hows and like literacy, digital literacy. So we have had users in Nepal who just were trained to use a smartphone when they before they headed out to the field. We have had users who were really good with like systems, and like they were hyperactive and like um, curious enough to like try and break the system. We've had users who did not understand English, so like the users who were using like who would speak only Spanish or Portuguese. We've had different kinds of users, and like all these users have been providing us feedback, and like we've been revising ourselves based on that, totally based on that. We've had this a big project in Nuakot of building 23,000 houses there. And then there are so many different kinds of users on the ground, like people who know how to use an app, people who have to be trained at every step, people who are coordinating in the office, people who are like on the ground for a month and then come back later and find difficulties syncing everything. So different kinds of contexts, different kinds of geographies, different kinds of problems, and you listen to your users. That's the bottom line. Like users are the end people that you're serving. You have to listen to them. So that's what we're doing as an engineer. And like in response to your question about like this rivalry or like things like that, I have a pretty like different kind of career that I've made so far. So I have been educated as a geomatics engineer, which is mostly GIS and mapping and like remote sensing and aerial imagery, things like that, which is totally different than what a mechanical engineer does. Or maybe there are points where both the engineering domains coincide, but then mostly it's like satellites and satellite images and sensors and all that we have to work on. But then I have this interesting switch. I had this switch to software development, which is not um, my expertise. But then I have been like able to set this team up that is mostly software engineers, and then I get a chance to introduce my knowledge on mapping and how data is dependent on geographies. It's not like data alone won't give you the totality, the total sense. You have to connect. You have to know where this is from. Like you have to differentiate between a house in Nepal and a house in Philippines. Like there are differences. There are cultural differences, but then geography is a big stake in it. So I have this fusion of geomatics engineering, software development. I have a good experience working with the UN systems now, so I know a sense of how the agencies respond to disasters, how the reconstruction initiatives have been made in Nepal, how the government works, how all these stakeholders are acting in this scenario. And like based on all these understandings, I basically direct or like change the direction on how we approach development or changes in the system. So it's a combination of all of that. But my expertise is kind of complementary to a civil engineering, because mapping is done before a civil engineer starts working on the field. So we give out a product that they start using after that. So it's kind of complementary, but software development and like systems like this they have come out as a fusion of all the experiences that I've had till now. So yeah, that helps a lot to me personally and to the product as well.
What about you, Nikita? Like, is there like some sort of a rivalry going on in different like parts of it? Like, I talk to all these people, and then even if you've been working as like a professional for 30, 40 years, like I talk to all these mentors, and they're always telling me, you're always going to have issues, you're always going to have these concerns from like the users, like your team members. How do you balance all of that? Like like whenever has there ever been an issue like somebody comes in fuming and then they're like, this is not working, and then you have to calm them down and then walk them through step by step, and then at the end of the day, or they're like, yeah, I was just too stressed, man, or something like that?
See, it's technology,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
So we cannot be 100% reliant on it at times. There comes bugs, there comes issues.
mhm,
It's fine. And since I am working with clients so closely, yes, we do get at times issues or bugs from the field. But most of the times, these issues and bugs they show up because the user did not know how to use the technology. Right?
mhm,
It's like human errors rather than the technology. Because on the technology end, we do our best. We have a dedicated QA team
mhm,
both at our contractors level with Arun's team, as well as here on field side, who make sure that every time we push an update,
mhm,
is every single element that is related to that update is checked, is revised. We have an entire Trello board. We have product development meetings every week. Me,
mhm,
Arun, Justin, we sit down together. We go through every updates, and we make sure that every other bug and issue is tested, retested, and then pushed out. So on our end, we are trying our level best, but there might be some issues. At times, the user might not have updated their application,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And then that's a user issue, and they come to us and they said, "Oh, the app is not working. This is not happening. That is not happening." But then that is why we have a dedicated support team here as well to solve these issues and make sure that we make them understand why these issues are coming up. So yeah, we do face issues, but we try our level best to handle them calmly, systematically, and then solve these issues with our partners and clients.
and
Yeah,
then
I mean,
this is going to be yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So I was about to add the cases where like we had hundreds of users facing this issue on the field, and then like we can't just stop and watch. We have to respond. So we work on like late nights, weekends, and then like make sure that we respond to their needs. And also sometimes these issues can be overwhelming to the team, to us who are trying to support our users. Like you get calls, you get emails, you get lots of like complaints whenever the system is not working well enough, and then you have to handle that properly. You have to encourage your users, because whenever there are issues with your system, there is a high chance that your user won't continue using the system anymore. So in order to retain your users, to make sure that they have full faith on the system, on the technology, you have to be by their side, like totally available. And that's what we do, like what we've been doing since 4 years.
Mhm,
The other thing is like it can be interesting is that we work in Nepal. The whole team is in Nepal. We're based in Nepal, but then our users are from different geographies. So you can expect like time zone differences. You'll receive calls and emails at midnight in Nepal, and there's no like a time where you would see more uses of the system and times where the users would go down. You expect same kind of uses from different geographies, meaning you have to stay active and respond to everyone 24 hours, 7 days a week. And that's something that's a difficult part, but then it's also interesting. Like you get to know the mindsets and like how people work in different countries. And that's interesting.
Yeah, how much, how many cups of coffee do you guys drink on a every night basis? Because it seems like like the coffee bill is like too high over there at a field site.
It's not that we are always doing that. There are times when we make big updates. We have to stand by, be there, and then um, sometimes it's like you have to stay in the office, you have to respond, you have to work late nights and weekends, and we don't generally work on nights. We don't have like a 24 hour service, but then we are standby. So whenever we are, wherever we are, we make that happen. Like we stay there for our users.
Hmm. What about you, Nikita? Like, how many cups of coffee do you have to drink?
I actually travel a lot because a lot of our partners are outside of Nepal. So a lot of the international clients that I'm handling, I need to travel and give them dedicated times of 2 weeks, a month. I recently traveled to Myanmar for a month. Actually got swine flu when I was there.
Hmm.
I was so ill. So there are two ways that FieldSite can be used. Either you can use it independently. We already have the sign up feature on. You can just go to app.fieldsight.org and then sign up, download our application from Google Play Store and start using it. We have a learning zone that will be up soon. We have manuals that will help you to get on board. We have everything, every feature and functionality step by step so that somebody who wants to use it independently, subscribe to our plans, and then use it can use it. Or we have a dedicated team here. That's what's very unique about FieldSite. We deploy our teams to different projects where we help them not only to structure the tool, but from the very onset of the project. Because monitoring protocols, building these forms, building these survey templates are the most difficult part of any project, right? That is the key part. If you don't have a good data capturing system, you wouldn't have a better result in the end. So our team basically has the expertise where we not only help them to use the tool, but then we help them to structure the entire monitoring supervision system. So we travel to different places. I travel to these different places. Justin, the entire team, we have a client success team who travels to different places and make sure that the partners are on board and using the tool in their best of ability. So
Can
yeah,
I
it
ask you?
does get hectic at times because the flights can get 18 hours, 20
Oh,
hours, depending on where we're traveling. So yeah.
yeah, I don't like traveling at all.
Right.
I would never do it again. Like if I had to do more than like 20 hours of flight, like it's like put me in like a box and just get me some like sleeping medicine and then just let me go through it. I do want to ask you something. You said something interesting. Is like you have some different plans and like subscription levels and levels of interaction. So how you're since you talk to users, how do you maintain this like payment plans? How do you determine what's the payment and uh how do you determine that? Like just basically the finance side of it all.
So it basically depends on what the project need is, right? FieldSite, unlike other tools, we don't track the number of users that are signing up, or the number of projects, or the number of sites. The basic subscription mechanism, it revolves around the number of submission that we get from the field, the number of forms that have been submitted. So that's the only key metric that we measure while determining the plan. So we have 6 different plans. You can just go to our website, it's fieldsite.org, and then you can see where does your project fit. So how much data is coming from the field? So if you have 23,000 sites, you're definitely going to have a lot of data coming in from the field. So you can determine different plans from our website, and we have a final tier as well, which is the extended tier, and the pro tier where we can customize the payment system as well, depending on how large your project is and how often you're using our system.
Mm. So what's the um I might ask this bluntly, and if you have the freedom to answer, you do. If you don't, like just say we can't answer that. What's the average ticket size? Like by ticket size, I mean like the order size, like that you guys need to charge to make break even. Because I know this is was, more of a social innovation, social enterprise. So how do you balance like the humanitarian side and the financial side? Because I talk to a lot of social innovation people here, and they're always like scratching their heads around this one
Mhm.
issue, balancing it between the humanitarian aspect of it and the finance aspect. Because I know it's not cheap to travel to different countries and have like a dedicated system, have all of these things on either AWS or Firebase on Google side, because I've tried doing it and it costs a lot. How do you do that?
Uh,
So in UNOPS, we are a cost recovery project, and we basically sell the platform, the application, right? And we have a free tier if somebody wants to pilot the tool. We do allow them to use the tool and check if it fits their project or not. It's not like you have to pay before even knowing what the system is. We have a free tier so that you can just pilot it, test it, and see if it best fits your project needs. And then after that, we make sure we highlight how we will increase their efficiency,
Mhm,
right? For example, if a company or an organization does a lot of recovery, reconstruction, rehabilitation, and building, and we all most of the projects they always have a 0.5% of you know damage loss. I'm not getting the perfect word, but then they tick off 0.5% as something that might go wrong, right?
mhm.
We can even reduce that percentage
Wow.
from 0.5 to 0.25, right? That
Mhm,
is output. So we
mhm,
basically show them the how the what the output of basically using this tool would be. How would it would just impact your project? How would
mhm,
it make it more efficient? And that's how we basically convince our clients or customers that this will basically reduce your rate of errors from
mhm,
50 to 25.
mhm,
So that's one of the key ways we basically convince them that this does have value and this will give you results.
mhm.
so
Um,
adding on that,
Yeah.
we are as a product, Fieldsight is not private. It's not for profit. So none of the revenue that we generate is like someone's property. So
mhm,
what we are charging people is we are charging for the data they accumulate in the system. So all the hosting charges, all the AWS fees that we get, that is what the users are paying for. We also charge users for the training if they ask for. We charge for the training, the time spent on the training. It's all like straightforward. This is the rate like you get trained.
Exactly.
We give you the trainer, and a lot of these travel expenses are beared by the client. So we're
mhm,
not if it's your project and you're trying to implement Fieldsight, you should be spending some time on capacitating your users, right?
mhm,
So that's what yeah, people do. Like they ask for support, we send out our training people, and then they bear all the expenses on that. Um, for the users that are trying to sign up and then like want to pay for certain amount of uses, we are basically charging for the hosting of the data and
mhm,
the technical maintenance of the system. So all the features that like all the support they need technically, we're providing them remotely or like on site. And then that's what users are paying for. It's not, we're not making any profit out of the tool, and that's not even allowable by the UN system. So we are totally a humanitarian sector product, and then all the charges are just for the sustaining of the product itself. So we have a
And the team.
clear
And the team.
direction on like we have a clear setup of why the revenue is generated, because as a tool we have to sustain, but then we're not overcharging anyone because it's not a commercial product. We don't want to make one penny more. We're not greedy for that. We
mhm,
have everything transparently put out by the UN system. So we are inside the UN system, meaning we have to have all our expenses, everything transparently presented to the UN. So it's a semi-commercial. I mean, you are generating revenue by selling a product, but then it's not commercial.
mhm,
So it's a mixed kind of, and it's an interesting case inside the UN as well. You don't
mhm.
see that kind of project inside the UN
Yeah. We're a
frequently.
very unique
We are
project.
unique.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that. So you guys like have this social innovation. You're part of the social innovation structure over there. How do other entrepreneurs get into that? Like I have like I've heard of so many people with like so many great ideas. They're coming up and like they're like I'm gonna build this and I'm gonna build that. And then they're like, yeah, man, you should go for it, or like sister, you should go for it. But then how do they get in touch with that kind of a ecosystem over there at UN? Can you answer a little bit of that?
Um, I mean, we also started up. So Justin basically applied for this UNOPS Innovation Fund as a part of his thesis. He's a Harvard grad and he's working for urban resilience, and that's how basically we got the idea of Fieldsight after we um, found out. After the earthquake, we basically, when we figured out this is the issue that is going on in Nepal. So I think, as adding on to what Arun said, we're not entirely I mean, we are looking into various ways we can work with the private sector and entrepreneurs. We are exploring that. But since we're under the UN, we're quite struggling to do that. But for every other emerging entrepreneurs, I think the key is to have dedication and to think that no idea is a bad idea, right? There are crazy apps around there. There are crazy tools everywhere. So any idea can work. So you just need to pursue whatever you believe in and then move forward. I think. And with the UNOPS, I'm not quite sure if there are other such innovation labs or innovation funds. The innovation fund that opened, we applied for it, we got it, and then that's how we developed Fieldsight with the World Vision Nepal Innovation Lab, who provided us space for ideation at the very onset of our project.
I think as an entrepreneur and completely out of this talk, I can suggest that if you have an idea that's contextual, right on time, like right after the earthquake, we had this idea of like developing a tool that would assist in reconstruction. So that was like a very relevant on time solution, and and ideas like these definitely get the fundings, and whether it be like a private sector funding or a government funding or a INGO funding, you are definitely going to get some. You just have to look at it.
Mhm.
There are so many things, so many sources of these fundings. Like you, I mean, I know dozens of them. But then for Fieldsight, the key stepping stone at that time was Nepal Innovation Lab, which was like this co-working space in Lalitpur. So
Mhm.
that was the space where like we initially designed the first system design of the product. So that was where we started the first idea discussion on how to and how to develop this system.
Mhm.
So innovation lab was you can now like find dozens of innovation labs, like
Mhm.
so many different kinds of places where they encourage entrepreneurs with new ideas, and they're ready to incubate them, like train them financially as well as technically. And all these are like platforms that give you a head start.
Mhm.
And back in 2004, 16, it was there were not so many of these incubators and places where they fund you. Now it's grown so big that you find so many investors, you find so many funders, donors, and incubators. Good idea is never going to go in vain, I think. That's as an entrepreneur, like I can suggest that for sure.
Mhm. I understand because like I met the dudes from Nepal Innovation Lab, like the dudes who were doing the Sikka project. You guys know about that, right?
Oh, culture,
Yeah.
yeah, Sandesh. Okay, yeah, we know
Yeah,
them.
I met them. I met them at this event where they were doing something related to blockchain. This other company, Isata, was doing like this blockchain event, and I met there. And the funny thing about it is, they had this flyer, and in the flyer there was a field sites came, and I was like,
Like,
how do I know this? Because they have we've been talking about this like recording for over a month, and then we had this different issues. Everybody's in a different geographical zone, and I was busy myself. But then we finally get to do this. I hope next time when we do this, we can even do this in a little bit of a like structured more, where we are sitting down and then we're talking about different parts of the app, and then we
yeah,
can also talk to maybe
like
Justin.
an app tour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can all grill three of you and say like this is not working and this is working and that sort of a thing. Uh, you guys have any questions for me about this whole podcasting and like what I'm trying to do? You're free, feel free to ask me right now. If you
Yeah,
don't,
actually, I saw your podcast when you interviewed Sajal. She's my friend from Bespani.
oh yeah, I know her. I know her. Like okay, she's your friend. I've known her since like 2012. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I saw she shared it on Facebook, and then I saw it, and it was quite interesting. And I was just wondering, because I'll be honest, you know, I say good thing like so.
Okay. It was something new for you when you watched it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you can explain how you started this idea, I could informally.
So okay, I came back to Nepal in December 2018, December 6th, and for a month went to all these, like he said, like Arun said, I went to all these places asking like I have this like this research project and I need like some sort of a
Where
funding,
were you before this?
huh?
Where were you before this?
New Orleans.
Okay.
Yeah, I graduated like, and then I stayed there for a year trying to get all these knowledges and everything, and then trying to understand like the basic entrepreneurial sector because I didn't want to work like anyone my age and has like some sort of a degree has this whole idea of, yeah, I'm gonna build my own $1 billion company and then I'm gonna have these yachts and I'm gonna have these places, not because of that, but I just wanted to do this research because who wants to work for somebody else? That was like my initial thinking. I know
Okay.
that's wrong. If you work for somebody you learn a lot, but I digress. And then I came here, and every day I go to meet these investors, and they're not ready to meet me. First of all, in business, if you want something, you have to give something to someone. So I'm going in and asking like someone from like this big shot bank, like a CEO, and then asking their time. What do I have to give to that person, right? I have nothing to give. And then I realized if I do a podcast, they get promotion, I get to learn, and it won't only be
Wow.
for me but for people who are trying to come back to Nepal and they can learn the same things that I need to learn because when you get detached for 5 years, you go away, you completely disassociate yourself with the economical machine that is in Nepal, and then you have to relearn all these things. And I've had the misfortune of being here like the first time and nobody's ready to talk to me like at that time, but I didn't want that for somebody else. And the other thing was I like talking. Since your friends with Sajal, she knows she's into debating and she was, and then we met through that, and I like having conversation, informal conversation, because I hate the meetings. We're sitting down like in suits and talking about growth margins and all of that. I don't like to talk like that. I like to talk like this. And that sort of got the ball rolling. And after 3 months, we organized this event. It was like a startup meet with this other organization. And that's what has pushed me. Up until last month, we had like some sort of a we did an event a day before yesterday actually, where we
Oh.
invited where we invited different entrepreneurs, and we had someone from Red Mud Coffee who also does a podcast like this. Check it out, Mera Dui Paisa. Uh,
Yeah.
we had
I'm a
someone from,
regular listener of
yeah,
that one.
I I talked to Mr. Adhikari on I've talked to him on numerous occasions, and then he's a really chill individual. He is what he shows in that podcast, and he's a
Mhm.
person who's learned it through the school of hard knocks, then just like a school. And
Mm.
appropriately, his company is named Dropout Media and Events. And hopefully, I'm trying to have him on this podcast too, and then we can talk about different things through this podcast. But yeah, those are the type of events we want to do. And that this is for me is more of a uh, it's like a networking machine, so that if you can connect with me and then somebody sees this video and then they see your project and they see like feel site, that'd be a win for me instead of getting viewers. Even if I get 20 viewers, I'm okay. But if you get like one person out of it, that's better, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
definitely.
good.
Any other
What do you do
questions, guys?
beside this?
Hello? Yeah.
What do you do beside this?
Oh, since I said I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm doing my own research. So this research is based on, okay, I don't want to go too deep into it. It's something related to my passion project. I'm trying to work on so composite materials, trying to build this outer structure um of a rocket, maybe. I don't know. It's like a rocket, but yeah, it's kind of hard to. It's just I'm doing research basically. Yeah, it's
Okay.
hard
Just
boiled
like
research.
doing things.
Yeah, I don't get into that in this podcast because this podcast is about you guys, right?
All right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any more questions for me, we can do this again. Thank you so much for giving me your time. And then this is really unconventional for all of us because I'm in different part of the city. She's in the office and he's in his car. But that's what remote working is, right? You
Exactly.
cannot expect someone to be in like the best situation because I've had to finish my like projects in the past, like sitting in the bathroom and then with my laptop and doing that because every other place in the whole house is like going through chaos and my roommates are going through crazy stuff. So you go through challenges like that, and especially in this economy you can't afford to lose time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
True.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. This was a wonderful chat we had. I hope everyone learned a lot. In the comment section and in the description section, I've divided each part of the conversation into different time codes, so you can click on that and see what the topic was, and then see our discussion on it. Thank you so much, Arun, and thank you so much, Nikita. We'll see you again, and hopefully next time we do it in person and we can like go through this app, and then you can show me all the cool features, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Definitely.
Thank you
Thank you
so much
so much. It was
for having us
so
here.
exciting.
Thank you, thank you.
This is the
That
first
feels.
time, but I'm really excited.
Thank you, thank you. Bye.
Bye.